You know what I think is that I've been telling my Babaji stories. I've lived on my Babaji stories for 32 years, 39 years. I started living on them from the moment I met him. And they're incredible. It's incredible to remember. But in the last few years, it's not so much all those stories. It's what we're doing with them. Mm-hmm. And how are we interpreting them into our lives. And every day, all those lessons that we had, they become richer and they become deeper. And there's a tremendous amount more meaning in them than I could perceive at the moment that they happened. There's so many levels and so many layers. So, like, when I first met Babaji, it was the second or the third day that I was there that he called me to actually have a meeting with me, to talk to me, you know, where are you from and everything. And I told Babaji that I had a son. And he said, I didn't give you permission to have a son. That's a big responsibility. Go get a picture. And he sent me back to where I was sleeping, and I got my bag and got a picture of my son. And I brought them this, you know, little picture of my baby. And he looked at it for a long time. And then he put it in a little plastic folder. And then he put it in a plastic bag, and then he put some of his hair in there and some seeds and closed it and said, you keep this with you always, and I'll always take care of your son. And it was beautiful. But he let me know that from the moment he called me till the moment I arrived, he didn't want me to have a son. It was something else. But I didn't really understand. That's all it was. Then I started the business. And then when I'd start to bring in money, oh, this is for your son. And he started setting stuff aside. And then he always asked and made sure how much money I had saved, put aside for my son. Was I sending enough money to his mother? You know, did the house get bought? All of these things. He was constantly asking. And he had me bring Aziz, came a couple times to Haidakhandi. He named him Ganesh. And, but then, at a certain point, when the house was bought, Babaji had checked on, you know, I had put money aside for Aziz's education. I wanted him to go to boarding school. I wanted him to get a really good education. And his mother didn't want that, and she didn't agree. But I had the money put aside. And then Babaji said to me in 1983 to bring Draupadi and her boyfriend, the man she was, her partner, Roger, and the other two children that he had. So all three children and the partner and Draupadi, and I send them tickets and bring them all. So I had to buy them the tickets, bring them all to India. And that was quite incredible. They all instantly became devotees. They all totally loved the experience, and I think you probably know some of them. And it was a great experience. But then at one moment, Babaji took Roger and me aside. And he said, you know, Roger, Kharku is my disciple, but he had a son. And that's a big responsibility. And he tied it back to the first thing, one of the first things he ever said to me. It was like 6 years had passed, and suddenly I saw the circle. And he said, now you're with Draupadi, you have a child with her, and you're taking care. Kharku's put money in the bank for Ganesh's education. Will you watch and see that Ganesh gets his education? Will you take care? Will you relieve Kharku of his responsibility? And then, of course, Roger said yes. And then Babaji said to me, now, Kharku, you've become a fakir again. Then he put me back in my langoti. He said, now you go around the world, close all the businesses, close everything, and be back here as quick as possible. And he sent me scrambling. And I gave everything away within 90 days, within 60 days, and I was back in Haidakhandi. And so that lesson never stops coming back to me. And I didn't even know it was a lesson. I didn't know it was a lesson until 6 years into it. And then since that, this last 33 years, it's been a force in my life. It's slowly, you know, we were talking about yesterday how truth and becoming honest enough to face really the truth of who we are, and what our selfish motivations are, and how we try to escape from things, deflect from things. So that's been actually one of the very foundation lessons that Babaji gave me, was to deal with responsibility, to accept responsibility, to know that you can't escape responsibility. Escaping responsibility is how we create our karma, how we create our negative karma. And I think it's really important that we start talking about what we've learned, not just remembering the stories, but what we've learned from these stories. You know, how they've turned us into who we are, how we live our lives. Because the more we just tell the young people the stories, it's just an experience they didn't have and can't even imagine. You know, we didn't even have the internet then. There wasn't even mobile telephones. Bottled water hadn't been invented when we lived in Haidakhandi. You know, they can't relate to our stories. It's just history. But I think people can relate to what we've done with them. I think that's maybe what would be really wonderful to it's great to record, it's great to have them. I love telling them, but I'm starting to feel more and more that we have to do something more with it. I'm really glad you're doing this.